Once upon a time, in a quiet village wrapped in rolling green hills and tall whispering trees, there lived a little girl everyone lovingly called Little Red Riding Hood. She wasn't called that because it was her real name, but because she wore a bright red hooded cloak her grandmother had sewn for her with careful hands and patient love. The hood fit her just right, warm in winter and light in summer, and it made her feel brave and special whenever she wore it. Red Riding Hood was cheerful, curious, and kind, with eyes that sparkled like she was always wondering what came next in the world. She loved listening to stories, asking questions, and helping her mother around their small, cozy cottage at the edge of the village. Their home smelled of fresh bread and wood smoke, and every morning sunlight slipped through the windows as birds sang on the roof. Red Riding Hood's mother was gentle but wise, the kind of woman who spoke calmly and thought carefully before making decisions. She had learned many lessons in her life, and she hoped her daughter would learn them too, not through fear but through understanding. Red Riding Hood loved her mother deeply, but like many children, she sometimes thought she already knew enough about the world. After all, the forest near their home looked friendly, full of flowers, butterflies, and familiar paths she had walked many times before. One bright morning, Red Riding Hood's mother prepared a basket filled with warm bread, fresh fruit, and a small jar of honey. She tied a ribbon around the basket and gently placed it into her daughter's hands. Her grandmother, who lived in a cottage deep in the forest, wasn't feeling well, and the basket was meant to cheer her up. As Red Riding Hood pulled on her red cloak, her mother knelt down and looked her straight in the eyes, her voice calm but serious. She reminded her to stay on the path, not to wander, and most importantly, not to talk to strangers along the way. She explained that the forest could be unpredictable, and even if something looked friendly, it wasn't always safe. Red Riding Hood nodded quickly, eager to start her journey. She had heard these warnings before, and though she meant to follow them, they felt distant and unnecessary to her young mind. The forest had always been kind to her. She hugged her mother, promised she would be careful, and skipped off toward the trees, her red cloak dancing behind her like a cheerful flame. The forest welcomed her with soft sunlight and gentle shadows. Tall trees stretched their branches overhead, and the path wound like a ribbon through mossy ground and colorful flowers. Birds fluttered from branch to branch, and squirrels darted playfully across the trail. Red Riding Hood hummed a tune as she walked, feeling safe and happy, enjoying the sounds and smells of nature. She noticed flowers she had never seen before and stopped to admire their bright colors. Each step took her farther from the village and deeper into the forest, but she didn't feel afraid. She felt curious. That was when she noticed someone watching her from behind a tree. A large wolf stepped forward slowly, his fur gray and smooth, his eyes sharp but calm. He smiled in a way that seemed friendly, almost polite. Red Riding Hood had never spoken to a wolf before, but this one didn't look scary. He bowed his head slightly and greeted her in a soft voice, asking where she was going on such a lovely day. Red Riding Hood hesitated for just a moment. Her mother's words floated somewhere in her mind, but the wolf's voice was gentle, and his smile didn't seem dangerous. She told him she was going to visit her grandmother and bring her some food. The wolf's ears perked up, and he asked where her grandmother lived. Without thinking too much, Red Riding Hood pointed down the path and explained where the cottage was, chatting easily, unaware that she was sharing more than she should. The wolf listened carefully, pretending to be interested and kind. He suggested that she take her time and enjoy the forest, maybe pick some flowers to brighten her grandmother's day. He mentioned a shorter path he knew that would get him there faster, and with a polite nod, he disappeared between the trees. Red Riding Hood watched him go, feeling proud of herself for being so grown-up and friendly. She didn't realize she had ignored the most important piece of advice her mother had given her. As she continued walking, Red Riding Hood wandered off the path to gather flowers. She laughed as butterflies danced around her, and she filled her arms with bright blooms, imagining how happy her grandmother would be. Time slipped by gently, unnoticed. The sun climbed higher, and the forest grew quieter. Still, Red Riding Hood felt calm, believing everything was just as it should be. Meanwhile, the wolf ran swiftly through the forest, taking the shortcut he had mentioned. His friendly mask faded as his thoughts turned clever and selfish. He reached the grandmother's cottage long before Red Riding Hood and knocked softly on the door. When the grandmother called out weakly, the wolf changed his voice and pretended to be Red Riding Hood. Trusting and tired, the grandmother opened the door, and the wolf quickly took her place, disguising himself in her nightcap and blankets. When Red Riding Hood finally arrived at the cottage, the sky had softened into afternoon light. She knocked gently and stepped inside, noticing at once that something felt different. The room was quiet, and her grandmother looked strange lying in bed. As Red Riding Hood came closer, she noticed the big eyes, the large ears, and the deep voice. One by one, she asked about them, her confusion growing with each answer. Her heart began to race as realization dawned too late. Just as the wolf revealed himself, a woodsman who had been passing by heard the noise and rushed inside. He chased the wolf away and rescued the grandmother, who was shaken but unharmed. Red Riding Hood burst into tears, not just from fear, but from understanding. She realized how close she had come to danger simply because she hadn't listened. The woodsman stayed until everyone was safe, and when Red Riding Hood and her grandmother hugged tightly, the lesson settled deep into the little girl's heart. She apologized again and again, her voice trembling, and promised she would never forget what had happened. Her grandmother held her gently, explaining that wisdom often comes from listening, especially to those who care about us. When Red Riding Hood returned home that evening, her mother listened quietly as the story poured out. There was no anger in her eyes, only relief and love. She hugged her daughter tightly, grateful for her safety. Red Riding Hood understood then that advice wasn't meant to control her, but to protect her. From that day on, Red Riding Hood walked the forest paths with new awareness. She still loved the trees, the flowers, and the birds, but she stayed on the path and remembered the voices of wisdom that guided her. She learned that curiosity was wonderful, but listening was just as important. And so, the story of Little Red Riding Hood reminds us all, young and old alike, that listening to wise advice can keep us safe, guide our choices, and help us grow into thoughtful, caring people. The world is full of beauty and wonder, but wisdom helps us enjoy it safely. Moral: always listen to wise advice.